as we were asked to send our papers round in advance, I sent mine round in advance because I'm very disciplined, which means I have no intention of reading it. So I'm afraid if you haven't read it, it's going to be a slight problem. You can refer to it, you have it, I hope. I'm just basically going to indicate some of the main things I wanted to say, okay? So it shouldn't take too long. The other thing is that this paper is full of holes. It's about an absolute minimal subject, all right? But the reason I chose this subject is because I think it concerns many different aspects of the penal project and illustrates them. And it helps us think about movement across the Mediterranean of people, of paper, of objects, of ideas, although I'm not going to discuss the material aspect of the paper, I'm afraid. I'm going to particularly talk about manuscripts and the particular nature of manuscripts. Okay, so the person who I'm dealing with, who translated this particular manuscript, is someone who is practically unknown. He's called Joseph Morgan. Practically everything that we know about Joseph Morgan is in my written paper. So if you want to know details, you'll have to look there. The important thing we need to know is that he spent 20 years in Algiers. Exactly, we're not quite sure why. He seems to have been partially a diplomat, but also done other things. He went back to Britain after these 20 years, and he just tried to make a name for himself as a writer, right? And partly by using his knowledge of North Africa. He wanted to be taken seriously as a scholar, and he published histories of North Africa, but he also, probably to make money, did political journalism, translation, and then he disappears. We don't know what happened to him, he just vanishes, and he went down, he has an undeserved reputation as a plagiarist, which he absolutely wasn't. So I'm talking about a particular manuscript concerned with him, and I'm talking about two main aspects in the paper of the role of manuscripts and why Morgan was interested in particular manuscripts. On the one hand, he used the particular manuscript that's mentioned to try to counter European prejudices against Islam, which he does in several works, and to get more sympathy for the Muslims. And on the other hand, he used it to help him to get a serious reputation as a scholar, right? Now, the work we're looking at is, so this is the translation that he published that I'm going to talk about. It's a translation of a work called, in Spanish, Discurso de Luz, by someone called Mohammed Ramadan, whose name is on the title page. And this was a manuscript work, and Mohammed Ramadan was a Morisco, that is one of the Moors expelled from Spain to North Africa. So that's why I said this also concerns people, refugees, because it's this community of exiled Moors from Andalusia who settled in North Africa. Morgan says he acquired this manuscript in Tunis. He explains who he bought it off. And what it is, it's an account of the Muslim religion. Okay. The interesting thing is, I'll come back to that, it was written in Arabic characters, but in a mixture of Spanish, dialect words, bits of Arabic. Okay. Now, the reason he published this was in order to give a voice to the Muslims, because this is a Muslim explanation of the Muslim religion, which the exiled Moriscos wrote for the people actually while they were still in Spain, apparently, because they weren't allowed to practice their religion. So Morgan is attempting to give this point of view by translating this manuscript, and he is he also translates, and there are some details in the paper, aspects of the Muslim religion that he knows are particularly delicate in England and that might create problems for him. He keeps on saying, now remember, I'm not saying this. This is the voice of this poor Moor. So, and he even discusses whether he should have translated it or not, etc. But his point is to use this manuscript to give the voice of the Moor, and including the aspects which I explain, which were particularly delicate in England in this time, which is the question of the denial of the Trinity which is one of the things he discusses that. But another thing he does with this manuscript, and also with another manuscript, because what's particularly intriguing is that he provides in this work, in the second volume, an extract, a translated extract from another manuscript, the same, written in Spanish in characters, that he says was lent to him, and because of being lent to somebody else who lent it to him, and he only had it briefly, and he translates aspects from it. He said he would really have liked to translate it, but he doesn't actually have the whole manuscript. So this is a manuscript we don't even have, right? And this particular manuscript, the other one, describes and denounces the sufferings of the Moors in Spain at the hands of the Spanish and the Catholic Inquisition, and insists on Catholic intolerance and barbarity. And so here, Morgan is also sort of presenting a sort of British Protestant patriotism as well. We have to understand there's also that going on. But he feels that this authentic voice of the Moors will increase sympathy for them. So it's a sort of an emotional appeal to get sympathy for these people by their own voice. Okay, so that's what he's actually trying to do by translating the manuscript. But what I think is interesting is the role that manuscript he thinks can also play, the fact that it's a manuscript in helping his own reputation. As I said, he wanted to be taken seriously as a writer. He wanted to have a reputation. And he presented this manuscript to Lord Harley, the leading politician at the time, who had a famous collection of manuscripts. And that's why it's still in the Harley collection in the British Library, this manuscript. And in fact, I mentioned in the text that the translation and the content of the work was studied in a very recent article by Nabin Matar, who also has seen the manuscript, and he gave a photograph. So that's one page of this manuscript, which is in the British Library. And so by presenting it to Harley, I think on the one hand, Morgan is, of course, trying to get patronage. He's appealing to Harley in the dedication to his work, but also to give dignity to this manuscript, because he actually talks about it as uncouth and Mauritanian. As you can see, it's not a beautiful manuscript. If we compare it with the ones that Louisa has just shown us, you can see that it's really not very prestigious. But perhaps by giving it to Harley in this collection of rare manuscripts, he wants to give it this sort of dignity, and therefore himself more dignity as the person who has brought this manuscript to England and made it available to the public. He also insists on the particularity of the manuscript. It's written in Spanish, in a mixture of dialects with Arabic words written in Arabic script. He says it was very well known in Tunis, and he claims that he himself is one of the few who are capable of understanding it, the few in Europe who are capable of understanding it, and so and translating it. So he's giving himself this position as a specialist on this part of the world by bringing this manuscript, by translating this manuscript, by explaining where he got it from, his connection with this country. Although apparently there is another copy of the manuscript of this work in another manuscript, which is in the Bibliothèque Nationale, which is apparently slightly later. He also insists on his own knowledge, because he talks about another work he wrote, as you can see on the front page. He talks about a discussion with people from North Africa, the people he knew. So again, he's trying to show how close he is to this. All right, but despite all of this and these efforts and these use of manuscripts, Morgan didn't succeed at all. He didn't get a serious reputation. As I said, he did hack work and then he vanished. The second volume of that's the first volume. The second volume of the Mohammedanism Fully Explained was published by subscription, which means that no printer wanted to publish it. And he said he would publish something afterwards, a continuation. That was never published. So apparently the public was not ready for this Moorish Muslim point of view. Also, Morgan himself was an outsider. We don't really know what he did in North Africa, but he was not in an important position, and he clearly didn't study very well. So, and he never managed to get patronage. There is a list of quite impressive list of subscribers, but that wasn't enough. Also, perhaps it's also the type of manuscript that wasn't the sort of manuscript that would get him prestige. Prestige was attached to these collections of Arabic manuscripts like the one that Louisa was talking about, and in England, the one at the Bodleian Library by famous historians or literary works, were studied by classical scholars and specialists. This one, as you saw, and as Morgan says, it's uncouth, it's Mauritanian. And also it's not actually in Arabic, it's in Arabic characters, but it's this mixture of Spanish and other things. So although according to Nabil Matar, who I say has studied this, he studied the content. According to him, this is an important work because it's the first life of the Prophet published by a Muslim source in English, that is Morgan's translation. It was apparently not considered important by Morgan's contemporaries because nobody wanted to buy it, and Morgan didn't succeed in getting a reputation. So I think that it's interesting to think about how someone thought this manuscript could be used, the type of manuscripts, and also the circulation of this manuscript. There was also, Jose Maria, who I asked, tells me that these sort of manuscripts in Spanish, but in Arabic characters are relatively, I mean, it's not the only case that they're relatively well known. And you said there are several of them. And I'm really quite curious about these. You know, I mean, I don't know if a study has been done. Morgan mentions, he gives in his preface an extract, a translation from another of these ones on a different subject that was in a public library in Amsterdam and had been translated into French. So I think it's interesting to think about what these particular manuscripts that are this mixture of different dialects, of different languages written in one script and in another language, what they show us precisely about the circulation of these people and these papers and also the ideas they contain. So I don't know if anybody has any other, if knows anything, I would be extremely interested. So that's why I wanted to talk about this. I said, you can read everything in my written paper. The thinking about how these manuscripts are linked to the fate of the Moriscos, these refugees from one side of the Mediterranean to the other, and how somebody, this unknown Morgan, brings it back again, translates it into English in the hope, you know, of bringing it to an English public who apparently is not particularly interested. So, well, and this, as I said, brings together several aspects of the PIMO project. Now, I didn't talk about the paper because I haven't seen the manuscript, but for the photo, it doesn't look too good. And I was also wondering, because Daniel Beringrad didn't seem to know either when he was asked about the Ottoman Empire, I would really like to know what paper, where the people writing this manuscript got the paper from, and where the people in North Africa, if they copied it, got the paper from, because I absolutely have no idea. Okay, so those are certain things that I would like to discuss. Thank you.